When you put all your heart into preparing your son's favorite meal for his anniversary, only for him to show up, grab his suitcase, and leave without even looking at you, a part of you shatters. All my life, I've been the woman who gave everything. I raised two kids, buried a husband, and believed my family was my fortress. But in a single cold moment, my daughter-in-law and my own son turned my home into a dusty storage closet. They didn't even look at the celebratory dinner I'd cooked or the gift I'd worked so hard on. It wasn't just rude, it was a betrayal. They had no idea that beneath the quiet, caring exterior was a woman ready to do whatever it takes to be seen. Their coldness and indifference were the biggest mistakes of their lives. What happened next changed everything. I made a decision they never saw coming, one that would turn their world upside down. They thought I was just an old woman who would sit and cry. But I showed them that even the quietest people have a voice, and that voice was heard by millions. You won't believe how a simple phone call to a local news station turned the situation on its head in the most unexpected way. Watch as I transform my pain into power, and as their perfect, fabricated life crumbles in a single moment. Are you ready to see the consequences of their cruelty? You won't want to miss the ending. My name is Patricia, and at 62, I've learned a thing or two about life. I've raised two kids, buried a husband, and have enough stories to fill a library. I'm a simple woman, really. I find joy in the small things. The smell of coffee brewing in the morning, the feel of warm soil between my fingers as I tend to my garden, and the laughter of my grandchildren. I especially love my garden. It's a sanctuary, a place where I can forget about the world and just be. I spent most of the summer preparing it, planting new hydrangeas and weeding out the invasive ivy. My hands were stained with dirt, my knees were sore, but the sight of the blooming flowers filled me with a quiet sense of triumph. It was my gift to my son, Ryan, and his wife, Jennifer, who were coming home for their 10th anniversary. I was so excited, my heart fluttering like a hummingbird. I wanted everything to be perfect. So I made their favorite roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes, their special anniversary cake, and I even bought a new dress. A simple, elegant navy dress that I thought would make me look respectable, not like an old woman who spends her days in the dirt. I felt a pang of loneliness as I set the table for three. It was a stark reminder that my husband, David, was no longer with me. He would have loved this. He always said I was the best cook in the world, and I could still hear his booming laugh echoing through the empty house. I tried to shake off the sadness. This was a day for celebration, not for grief. Ryan and Jennifer were my family now, and I was going to make this anniversary a night to remember. The doorbell rang, and my heart leapt into my throat. They were here! I smoothed out my dress, took a deep breath, and opened the door, a wide smile on my face. Ryan stood there, a handsome man in a tailored suit, but his face was tight with impatience. Jennifer was beside him, her face a perfectly made-up mask, but her eyes held a cold, calculating glint. She was beautiful, I had to admit. Her blonde hair was a perfect cascade of curls, and her designer dress probably cost more than my entire retirement fund. "Mom," said Ryan, his voice flat, "we're here. Let's get this over with." My face faltered. My heart, which had been so full of excitement just moments before, sank into my stomach, heavy and cold. The smell of the roasted chicken, which had been so inviting, now seemed to mock me. But But I cooked your favorite meal, and I baked a cake. I thought we could celebrate here, just the three of us, like we used to." My voice was a soft, wounded whisper. Jennifer gave a short, humorless laugh. "Patricia, darling, it's our 10th anniversary. We're celebrating at the Marriott, not in some dusty old house." She looked around my perfectly clean living room with a sneer, as if she were inspecting a condemned building. Her words were like a physical blow, and I recoiled. My son, my own son, didn't say a word. He just stood there looking at his watch as if my very existence was an inconvenience. He went inside and grabbed two suitcases from the corner of the living room, dusty from where they had been sitting for months. Ryan, please, I said, my voice cracking. Couldn't you just stay for a little while? The food will get cold. Mom, we don't have time for this, he said without looking at me. We're leaving. We'll call you. He and Jennifer turned to go, and I reached out, my hand grasping at the air. But you forgot your present, I said, my voice barely audible. I held out a small box, wrapped in silver paper with a white bow. It was an antique watch that had belonged to his father. I'd had it restored just for this day. Ryan glanced at the box, then at me, and a flicker of, was it pity? Resentment? Passed through his eyes. Keep it, Mom. We have plenty of watches. You know we don't need another one. My hand fell to my side, the box feeling like a lead weight. I watched them walk away, their silhouettes growing smaller and smaller in the twilight. They didn't even look back. The front door closed with a soft thud, and I was alone again, surrounded by a meal I had cooked with so much love, and a cake that would go uneaten. The silence was deafening. It wasn't just my house that was empty, it was my heart. I stood there for a long time, the tears streaming down my face. I was just an old woman in a dusty old house, a ghost in a life that had moved on without me. This was it, wasn't it? The end of the story. I was just a footnote in their lives, a forgotten chapter. My chest felt tight, the air thick with unspoken disappointment and a sadness so profound it felt physical. I walked to the kitchen and stared at the dinner, the food now cold and congealed. The rosemary potatoes, once so golden and inviting, looked like lumps of clay. The cake, with its delicate frosting, seemed to mock my futile effort. I felt a sudden, irrational fury. I grabbed a plate and threw it against the wall, the ceramic shattering into a million pieces. The sound was so sharp and violent, it was a shock to my system. I stood there, trembling, and then another plate and another until the floor was littered with shards of my broken dreams. I finally collapsed into a kitchen chair, my body racked with sobs. My son, my beautiful boy, and my wife, my supposed daughter, had treated me like a stranger. My kindness, my love, my hard work, it was all for nothing. It was a cold, hard truth that settled in my bones. I was invisible to them. I was a burden, a nuisance, a relic of a life they no longer wanted to acknowledge. That's when I had to ask myself, and I'm asking you now, what's a mother to do when her own children discard her like a piece of old furniture? Do you just accept it? Do you fade away and become that ghost they already see you as? Or do you find the strength to fight back? I stood there for a long time, the tears streaming down my face. I was just an old woman in a dusty old house, a ghost in a life that had moved on without me. This was it, wasn't it? The end of the story. I was just a footnote in their lives, a forgotten chapter. My chest felt tight, the air thick with unspoken disappointment, and a sadness so profound it felt physical. I walked to the kitchen and stared at the dinner, the food now cold and congealed. The rosemary potatoes, once so golden and inviting, looked like lumps of clay. The cake, with its delicate frosting, seemed to mock my futile effort. I felt a sudden, irrational fury. I grabbed a plate and threw it against the wall, the ceramic shattering into a million pieces. The sound was so sharp and violent, it was a shock to my system. I stood there, trembling. And then another plate, and another, until the floor was littered with shards of my broken dreams. I finally collapsed into a kitchen chair, my body racked with sobs. My son, my beautiful boy, and his wife, my supposed daughter, had treated me like a stranger. My kindness, my love, my hard work, it was all for nothing. It was a cold, hard truth that settled in my bones. I was invisible to them. I was a burden, a nuisance, a relic of a life they no longer wanted to acknowledge. But as I sat there, a new emotion began to simmer beneath the surface of my grief, a fiery, righteous anger, a rage so pure and hot it burned away the tears. They thought they could just walk away? Leave me with a broken heart and a cold dinner? They were so busy rushing off to their fancy hotel and their $10,000 dinner that they didn't even notice the small antique watch still clutched in my hand, the watch that belonged to their father, the watch that was worth more than their entire anniversary trip. And they didn't know about the trust fund I'd set up for their children, the one that required a simple handwritten note from me to release the funds, a note that I was now seriously considering rewriting. They think they know me. They think I'm just an old, sad woman, a ghost. But what they don't know is that ghosts can haunt, and I was just getting started. I had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to keep the family together. But that woman died tonight in this kitchen, surrounded by broken plates and uneaten food. The old Patricia is gone, and a new one has arisen from the ashes. I won't let them do this to me. I won't let them walk all over me. They have no idea what's coming, do they? They have no clue that their entire perfect, lavish life is about to unravel, one perfectly coiffed thread at a time. The revenge I'm about to serve will be colder than any dinner they could ever eat. And it's all because they made me walk. What happens next will turn their world, and maybe my own, completely upside down. It's a truth I'm still coming to terms with myself, but I know it with a certainty that chills me to the bone. They made a grave mistake by underestimating me. You won't want to miss what I do next. The old woman who had been a doormat for a decade was dead. Long live the new one, the one with a fire in her belly and a plan brewing in her head. I wiped the last of the tears from my eyes, the cold reality of the situation finally hitting me. My son and his wife weren't just thoughtless, they were cruel. They saw me as a means to an end, a free storage unit for their forgotten belongings, a relic to be tolerated only when convenient. But they had made a fatal miscalculation. They had forgotten that this old, dusty house was more than just a place to leave their suitcases. It was my castle, and I was the queen. And queens don't take kindly to being treated like peasants. My first order of business was to get my house back in order. I grabbed a broom and began sweeping up the shattered remains of my ceramic plates, each shard a testament to my broken heart and a promise of future retribution. The silence of the house, which had been so painful just moments before, now felt like a blank canvas, a place where I could begin to paint a new life for myself, one that didn't revolve around the whims of my ungrateful son and his materialistic wife. I needed to get my head on straight, to stop wallowing in self-pity and to start acting. My phone rang, and I flinched. It was my younger sister, Carol. She was a no-nonsense woman, a retired nurse who had seen it all and wasn't afraid to tell you what she thought. I loved her for it. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself before answering. "Hello, Carol." "Patty, honey, you sound terrible. What's wrong? Did the kids not show up?" she asked, her voice filled with a familiar mix of concern and bluntness. I choked back a sob. "They showed up, Carol. They just came to pick up their luggage. They didn't even stay for dinner." The words tumbled out of me, a flood of hurt and humiliation. "What? Are you kidding me?" Her voice rose in outrage. "After you spent all day cooking and cleaning? What the hell is wrong with them? That's a new low, even for those two." I felt a surge of warmth at her indignation.
She was my rock. I don't know, Carol. I don't understand it. I gave them everything. I sacrificed so much for them, and this is what I get in return? My voice cracked again. Oh, sweetie, she said, her voice softening. Come on over. I'll make you a cup of tea and we can talk about this. You can't just sit there all alone. I hesitated. I didn't want to be a burden. I don't know, Carol. I'm just so... Don't be ridiculous, she cut me off. You're my sister. You're never a burden. Now, get in your car and get over here. I'm not taking no for an answer. I hung up the phone, a small, sad smile on my face. Carol was right. I couldn't just sit here and feel sorry for myself. I needed to do something. So I changed out of my navy dress, put on a pair of comfortable jeans and a sweatshirt, and drove to her house. Her small, cozy bungalow was a stark contrast to my big, empty house. It was filled with life, with the smell of her famous apple pie and the sound of her cat purring on the windowsill. She hugged me as soon as I walked in, and I clung to her, a dam of tears finally breaking. I told her everything: the dinner, the cake, the luggage, their cold, dismissive attitude. And I told her about the watch, the one they didn't even bother to look at. Carol listened patiently, her face a mask of sympathy and simmering anger. Patty, I'm so sorry. I I just don't know what to say. They've gone too far this time. I know, I said, my voice hoarse, but I'm not going to let them get away with it. I told her about the trust fund, the one I had set up for their kids. I'm going to rewrite it, Carol. I'm going to give it all to charity, every last cent. Her eyes widened. Patty, are you sure? That's that's a lot of money. Are you sure you want to do that? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said, a sense of clarity and purpose washing over me. They don't care about me. They only care about money. And if that's what it takes to get their attention, then so be it. This isn't about revenge, Carol. It's about a mother's last resort to get her children to see her, to realize that she's a human being, not just a walking ATM. I looked into her eyes, my resolve as firm as a rock. And this is just the beginning.
The next day, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I had a mission, a righteous quest, a cause to fight for. I was no longer a victim. I was a warrior. My first stop was my lawyer's office, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had been our family lawyer for decades. He was a kind, elderly man with a sharp mind and an even sharper wit. He listened patiently as I explained my situation, his expression a mixture of sympathy and professional curiosity. So, you want to change the beneficiaries of the trust fund, Mrs. Vance? He asked, his voice low and calm. You want to redirect the funds from your grandchildren to a charitable organization. That's right, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice firm. I want to donate it all to the local animal shelter. They do such wonderful work, and those animals deserve a chance at a good life. I didn't tell him the real reason. I didn't tell him that it was a calculated move, a cold-blooded act of vengeance. I didn't want him to think I was some kind of monster. But a monster is exactly what I was becoming, a monster born of a broken heart. Well, he said, adjusting his glasses, the trust is completely under your control, so you're well within your rights to do so. It's a simple matter of paperwork. We can have it all finalized by the end of the day. I felt a thrill of power course through me. It was so easy, too easy. I had spent years building this trust, a nest egg for my grandchildren, a symbol of my love and devotion. And in one fell swoop, I was about to dismantle it. A part of me felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it down. This was for their own good, I told myself. A lesson they needed to learn. A lesson in gratitude, in respect, in humanity. But even as I told myself that, I knew it was a lie. This was about me. This was about my pain. This was about making them feel just a fraction of the hurt they had inflicted on me. When I got home, I felt a sense of both triumph and emptiness. I had a feeling that this decision, this act of revenge, would not bring me the peace I sought. But it was a step, the first step on a long road, and I had no intention of turning back. I began to organize the house, not just cleaning, but rearranging, moving furniture, painting the walls a new color, making it my own again. The house, which had been a tomb of memories, was slowly becoming a home. My home. The phone rang again, and this time, I knew who it was. My daughter, Sarah, who lived in another state. She was the polar opposite of her brother, a kind, loving woman who always put family first. I loved her with all my heart, and a part of me felt a sense of dread. I knew she would be furious. She would see this as a cruel, vindictive act, and she would be right. I answered the phone, my voice trembling slightly. "Hello, Sarah." "Mom, what in the world is going on?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "Ryan just called me. He said you're acting crazy. He said you're not speaking to him. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "Sarah, honey, listen to me. I'm fine. But I need to tell you something. They came over last night. Ryan and Jennifer. They were here for their anniversary, but they only came to get their luggage. They didn't even stay for dinner." My voice broke and I felt the tears welling up again. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then, "Mom, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry," she said, her voice soft, compassionate. But I heard you're changing the trust fund. Ryan said you're giving it all to a charity. Mom, are you sure about this?" I bit my lip. "Yes, Sarah, I am." "But Mom, that money was for the kids, for their college fund. It's not right. You can't just take it away from them." Her voice was filled with hurt and disappointment that was 100 times more painful than my son's cold indifference. And that's the thing, isn't it? When you're wronged by the people you love, you think you're justified in seeking revenge. But what if your revenge hurts the very people you're trying to protect? The innocent ones. The ones who had nothing to do with it. What if my quest for justice turns me into the villain? What if I'm not the hero of this story, but the monster? After the second chapter, you might be asking yourself, what will happen next? Will I go through with my plan? Will my daughter's words make me reconsider? Will my son and his wife finally get their wake-up call? You can't possibly imagine what's coming, so stay tuned. The morning after my conversation with Sarah was a blur of righteous fury and a gnawing sense of self-doubt. My sister, Carol, had been a hurricane of support, a one-woman army ready to storm the gates of Ryan and Jennifer's fancy hotel. But Sarah's reaction, that hurt in her voice, it was a different kind of pain. It wasn't the cold, dismissive cruelty of my son. It was the honest, heartbroken disappointment of a daughter who saw her mother acting in a way she didn't understand. She saw a cruel and vindictive woman, not a wronged and broken one. I had to admit, a part of me saw it too. Was I really doing the right thing? Or was I just letting my anger turn me into the villain of my own story? I spent the better part of the day in a haze of internal debate. I replayed every second of that horrific anniversary night. The cold, sterile look in Jennifer's eyes. The way Ryan checked his watch, as if I were a meeting he desperately wanted to end. The untouched food on the table, a testament to my wasted love. No, I told myself, this isn't about being a villain.
This is about making a statement. This is about showing them that there are consequences to their actions, that a mother's love isn't a bottomless well to be drained and then forgotten. The decision was made. The papers were signed. The trust fund was gone. The money was now a beacon of hope for abandoned animals, not a security blanket for my grandchildren. A part of me felt a cold, hard satisfaction. The other part felt like I had just cut off a limb. But I had to push through. There was no turning back now. My next move had to be carefully planned. I needed to get the word out, but I couldn't just call Ryan and tell him what I'd done. He'd just laugh and tell me I was crazy. I needed to be strategic. I needed to hit them where it would hurt the most, their reputation. They were all about appearances, about projecting a perfect, successful life. I was going to expose the rot underneath that shiny surface. The perfect opportunity presented itself on social media. I'd never been much of a Facebook user, but I knew that's where Ryan and Jennifer lived. They posted about their lavish vacations, their designer clothes, their perfect life. It was a carefully curated facade, and I was about to crack it wide open. I sat down at my computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the point of no return. I started to type, my words a slow, deliberate stream of consciousness. I spent all day preparing a special anniversary dinner for my son and his wife. I made their favorite roasted chicken, baked a cake, and even bought a new dress. I was so excited to see them, but they didn't even stay for dinner. They came to pick up some luggage they had left here months ago, and then they left, just like that. They said they had a reservation at the Marriott. I posted a picture of the untouched dinner table, the cake, the candles, the empty chairs. It was a quiet, heartbreaking image, a visual representation of their cold cruelty. I didn't tag them, I didn't use their names, but I knew their friends and family would see it. They would talk, and that's all I needed. I also decided to call my daughter Sarah again. I knew she'd be angry, but I wanted her to hear the truth from me. I wanted her to understand why I was doing this. I told her about the Facebook post and about how I had to get their attention. I explained that I wasn't just being vindictive. I was trying to reach them, to get them to see what they had become. She listened silently, and when I was finished, she just sighed. "Mom," she said, her voice soft, "I get it, I do, but this isn't going to fix anything. It's just going to make things worse. You know how they are. They'll just get angry and cut you off completely." "Maybe," I said, with a glimmer of hope in my heart. "But maybe, just maybe, they'll see the truth. Maybe they'll finally see me."
The silence after the Facebook post was deafening. I checked my page constantly, my heart a hammer against my ribs. There were a few likes, a few comments from old friends who said they were sorry, but nothing from anyone in Ryan and Jennifer's circle. Maybe it hadn't worked. Maybe they hadn't seen it. My hope began to waver, and I felt a familiar sense of despair creeping in. But then, my phone rang. It was Carol. "Patty, honey, you're all over the place," she said, a note of frantic excitement in her voice. "All of our friends are asking about your post. They're saying how awful it is. You've got them all talking." A small smile formed on my face. "Really?" "Yes, and I have an idea. We need to go bigger. We need to go public. We need to let the whole world know what kind of people they are. Let's get you on the news. I'll make some calls." I gasped. "Carol, are you crazy? The news? I can't do that. I'm not a celebrity. I'm just an old woman." "Exactly," she said, her voice filled with a mischievous glee. "That's what's so powerful about it. It's not some celebrity scandal. It's a real story, a real woman, a real heartbreak. People will eat it up. You'll be a hero." I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. The news? Me? On television? The thought was terrifying. It was crazy. But a part of me, the new, brave part of me, was intrigued. This was a chance to finally get my message across, a chance to show them and the world that a mother's love isn't something to be taken for granted. And it was a chance to hit them even harder than the trust fund. Because if there was one thing they valued more than money, it was their public image. I wasn't just going to expose them to their friends. I was going to expose them to everyone. I was going to turn their perfect, curated world into a public spectacle. The next day, Carol called me back. Patty, I did it. I got you a spot on a local news channel. They want to do a segment on family relationships and the role of older parents in the lives of their adult children. They want to hear your story. You'll be on the 5 o'clock news tonight. My heart leaped into my throat. Tonight? This was happening so fast. I was terrified. But as I thought about Ryan and Jennifer, about their cold faces and their dismissive words, a wave of resolve washed over me. I was not going to be a victim anymore. I was going to be a survivor, and I was going to tell my story. What happened on that news segment would change everything. It would either be my ultimate triumph or my final humiliation. They had no idea what was coming, and I was about to pull the trigger. After this chapter, you're probably on the edge of your seat. Will the news segment expose my son and his wife to the world? Or will it backfire and turn me into a laughingstock? I've made my bed, and now I have to lie in it. You have to stay to find out if I will rise victorious or fall. This is a journey you don't want to miss. The new studio was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Bright lights, hurried technicians, and the calm, reassuring voice of the anchor, a man named Tom Harrison. I sat in a comfortable chair, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feeling 1,000 years old. I was a simple woman from the suburbs, and I was about to be on television, all because my son and his wife couldn't be bothered to stay for a simple dinner. It was the most absurd, ridiculous, and terrifying thing I had ever done. Carol sat beside me, squeezing my hand, a look of fierce pride on her face. "You've got this, Patty. Just tell them the truth." The camera lights turned on, and Tom Harrison's face, so familiar from my nightly news viewing, turned to me with a kind smile. "Eleanor." "I'm sorry, Patricia. Can you tell us what happened on your son's anniversary?" I took a deep breath, and the words came out, a little shaky at first, but gaining strength as I went on. I told them everything, about the garden, the dinner, the cake, the new dress. I painted a picture of a loving mother, excited to see her children, and a son and daughter-in-law so consumed by their own lives that they couldn't spare a moment for her. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the story simply and honestly, and let the facts speak for themselves. The silence in the studio was absolute. When I finished, Tom Harrison just nodded, his expression one of deep sympathy. "And now, we understand you've made a very significant decision regarding your family's future," he asked, his voice soft. I hesitated. This was the moment of truth, the moment I would go from a heartbroken mother to a woman seeking revenge. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I've decided to change the beneficiaries of my family trust. The money, which was meant for my grandchildren, will now go to a local animal shelter." I saw the shock on Tom Harrison's face, the flicker of surprise and something else. Was it respect? Admiration? He turned to the camera and said, "And we'll be right back with more on this powerful story after the break."
As the lights dimmed and the studio went back to its controlled chaos, Carol grabbed me in a tight hug. "Patty, you were magnificent. You were so brave. You told them the truth and you didn't hold anything back." I felt a quiet sense of triumph. I had done it. I had pulled the trigger. The word was out. My son and his wife would soon find out, and I knew it would hit them hard. Their perfect image, their public reputation would be shattered. I had a feeling that the silence on their end of the phone was about to be replaced by a cacophony of rage. And I was ready for it.
The moment I got home, the phone started ringing. It was my son, Ryan. I took a deep breath and answered, my hand trembling slightly. "Mom, what in the world did you do?" he screamed, his voice filled with a blind, unadulterated fury. "Are you insane? You're on the news. The whole world knows our business. My boss called me. My friends are all texting me. What is wrong with you?" I held the phone away from my ear, a small, sad smile on my face. "Hello, Ryan. It's nice to finally hear from you. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten my number." "Don't give me that. You're ruining my life. You're making me look like a monster." "A monster?" I said, my voice calm and even. "Ryan, you made yourself look like a monster when you left me with a cold dinner and a broken heart. I just let the world see what you've become." He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He was a master manipulator, and I knew he was trying to find a way to twist this to his advantage. "Mom, please," he said, his voice suddenly softer, more pleading. "This is all a big misunderstanding. We were just so tired from the trip. We didn't mean to hurt you. Let's talk about this. Let's fix this. We'll come over tomorrow and we can all have dinner together." I almost laughed. "Oh, Ryan, you think I'm that naive? You think I'm going to fall for that? You're not calling because you want to make amends. You're calling because you're worried about your reputation. You're worried about the trust fund." "What about the trust fund?" he asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. "I changed the beneficiaries," I said. My voice is cold as ice. "It all goes to charity now. You won't see a dime." There was a moment of silence, a stunned, horrified silence, then a shriek from the other end of the phone. "Ryan, you idiot! What did you do?" It was Jennifer. I could hear her voice, high-pitched and frantic. "I told you to be nice to her. I told you she was going to be a problem. We've lost everything." I hung up the phone. I stood there, holding the cold plastic, a sense of finality washing over me. It was done. The old woman who had been a doormat was truly gone. I had burned the bridge, and I had no regrets. My son and his wife had pushed me too far, and I had pushed back. The world might see me as a vengeful monster, but they had no idea what it felt like to be betrayed by your own flesh and blood. They had no idea what it felt like to be invisible. But they were about to learn. What's coming next is the climax of this story. You'll see their public humiliation, my quiet victory, and the surprising twist that no one saw coming. You're going to want to stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next.
The day after my television appearance felt surreal. My phone was a constant beacon of notifications, a tsunami of messages, calls, and comments. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, some to offer support, others to tell me I was a hero. I was a trending topic, a viral sensation. My story had resonated with people, not because it was a tale of grandeur, but because it was a quiet, heartbreaking reality for so many. The old me, the one who would have been mortified by all the attention, was replaced by a sense of calm resolve. This wasn't about fame. It was about finally being seen. But just as I was starting to feel a sense of peace, the next wave hit. The phone rang again, and I saw a different name on the screen this time. Sarah. I took a deep breath, and answered. Her voice, usually so calm and kind, was a torrent of a different kind of emotion, not anger, but a profound and heartbreaking sadness. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking, What did you do?" "Sarah, honey, I know you're upset, but I had to do this. I had no other choice. They weren't listening to me." "Upset? Mom, I'm not just upset," she said, and I could hear her sobbing. "I'm heartbroken. The kids, my kids, they're being bullied at school. Their friends are making fun of them. My son came home crying because someone called his dad a monster." The words were like a physical blow. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. The ground beneath me felt like it was shifting. My quest for justice, my carefully planned revenge, had hurt the one person I never, ever wanted to harm. My daughter. My sweet, compassionate Sarah. And my grandchildren. The innocent little souls who had nothing to do with their parents' cruelty. My stomach twisted in a knot of guilt and shame. I had become the very thing I despised, a selfish, thoughtless person who only cared about her own pain. I had made my children, the ones who were not cruel, who were not selfish, pay the price for their brother's sins. "Oh, Sarah, I didn't think about that," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm so, so sorry. I never meant to hurt you or the kids. I was so angry." "Angry? Mom, this isn't about being angry. This is about a family tearing itself apart on national television. You've gone too far. You've lost your mind. I don't even know who you are anymore." She hung up the phone, and I was left in a silence that was 100 times more painful than the one I had experienced a few nights before. The triumph I had felt earlier had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard sense of dread. I had won the battle, but I had lost the war. My revenge had cost me the love and respect of my daughter. I sat there for a long time, the tears finally coming, not for myself, but for the beautiful family I had just destroyed. My quest for justice had turned into an act of profound and irreversible cruelty. I had tried to get their attention, to make them see me, and in doing so, I had made myself invisible to the one person who truly saw me. And the truth, the horrible, undeniable truth, settled over me like a shroud. I was the monster. I was the one who was truly insane. And then, just as I was at my lowest, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a message from an old friend, a woman named Beverly, who I hadn't spoken to since high school. The message was short and simple. "Patty, I saw the news. I'm so sorry. I know this is a painful time, but please, I need to talk to you. I think I have a way to help you." I felt a flicker of curiosity, a small, desperate spark of hope in the darkness. What could she possibly have to say? I messaged her back, a simple word, "Call me." I had no idea what she had in mind, but at this point, I had nothing left to lose. I had already lost everything that mattered. This is a crossroads. I've gone too far, and now I have to face the consequences. But what if there's a way out? What if there's a different kind of justice, one that doesn't require me to become the very thing I despise? You'll have to keep reading to find out what Beverly's message really means. The final chapter will surprise you.
I called Beverly. Her voice was just as I remembered it, warm, steady, and filled with a certain kind of no-nonsense optimism. She didn't waste time on platitudes. Patty, I saw the news. I'm so sorry, honey. But I also saw an opportunity for you to turn this around. I've been working with a group of lawyers who specialize in cases of elder financial abuse and emotional neglect. You're a textbook case, and your story has gone viral. You have a platform now. You can use it to help others. I felt a jolt of recognition. This was it. This was the true justice I had been looking for. Not the vengeful, spiteful kind, but a righteous, meaningful one. Beverly, what are you talking about? She explained a strategy that was both brilliant and, in a strange way, incredibly simple. The lawyer, she said, would help me set up a nonprofit foundation. We would call it the Patricia Vance Foundation for Elder Advocacy. The goal would be to help other elderly people who had been emotionally and financially abused by their own children. We would use my story, my public platform, to raise awareness and money. The trust fund money I had already donated to the animal shelter would be the seed money for the foundation, and we would fight for a new kind of justice, not a legal one, but a moral one. The idea was a revelation. It was a way to take all the pain, all the humiliation, and all the hurt and turn it into something good. It was a way to make my son's cruelty and Jennifer's callous indifference mean something. It was a way to honor the love I had for my family, even the parts that were broken. I said yes. I told her I was all in. Over the next few weeks, my life transformed. I worked with the lawyers and a public relations team. My small, heartbroken story became a national campaign. I spoke at conferences, I gave interviews, and I met other people who had similar stories. People who had been forgotten, who had been cast aside, who had been made to feel invisible. I wasn't alone, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a monster. I felt like a hero. My son and his wife tried to fight back. They went on social media and tried to discredit me, to call me crazy, to say I was just an old woman who had lost her mind. But no one listened. My story was already out there, and it had resonated with too many people. Their perfect, curated world was crumbling around them, not because I was vindictive, but because they had built it on a foundation of lies and cruelty. And then, a phone call I never expected. It was Sarah. Her voice was different this time. It wasn't angry or sad. It was soft and full of pride. "Mom, I just saw your interview. You're amazing. You're so brave. I'm so sorry for what I said. I was just I was just scared. I'm so proud of you." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't about hurting others. It's about healing yourself and helping others. I didn't get my son back, but I got my daughter back. And that was the only victory that truly mattered. I had been betrayed, I had been humiliated, and I had been left with nothing but a broken heart. But in the end, I had found a new purpose. I had found a way to take all the pain and turn it into something beautiful. And I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was just getting started.